Everybody, welcome to another installment of Show to Be with Mike G, the show of live amplifiers, guitar, science, New Orleans, and so much more. With today's guest, the owner and president of J's Liqueurs, Mr. Ted Breaux, the man responsible for bringing absinthe back to America. And his absinthe is an amazing portrayal and historical homage to the old-style flavors of French absinthe. And we talk about how he extracted those flavors, how he rebuilt the market for absinthe in America, and so much more. Lots of music talk in there as well. So, without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy this great chat with the man who brought absinthe back to America, Mr. Ted Breaux.
A lot of talent, some very creative cocktails, but also very good. It's difficult for us to judge.
Yeah.
We had participants come in from San Antonio and Houston as well. It went on for quite a while. And then and then we stopped in at Péché after, and
of course,
and then ran into some of the same people who had the same idea. Imagine that. Right.
Yeah, I think Sean was one of the guys. He works at Péché, and then he submitted a cocktail as well.
Yes, and we thought very highly of that cocktail. In fact, that whole crew did. They submitted.
Yeah.
And did very well, and we were there until fairly late last night. Big crowd on Monday. Quite surprising.
Yeah. Well, they've got great deals on Monday, but it kind of makes me think. So, I think that your spirits company, we're talking 2000, right? Where it was actually officially formed, whether there was stuff to market.
Yes.
So you're here 16, 17 years later with people ultimately paying creative homage to the spirits you've brought to the world. How do you feel about that now, over 15 years later, that people still using your stuff, still paying tribute and being creative with your tools?
Well, I mean, in 2000, I became the first person to actually analyze samples of vintage absinthe drawn from the sealed, full antique bottles using modern science. It had never been done.
Deconstruct, reverse engineering, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, eventually that's what it came to be. Originally, I was just looking to find out what it was that could have caused this bad reputation. I was looking for something that was injurious or, hallucinogenic or something that was something that should not have been there.
Right.
And I found nothing. And that was, first of all, a paradigm shift in my understanding, because I had studied absinthe for over 6 years by that time. Began a paradigm shift in my understanding, had to rearrange the pieces of the puzzle, and found that, wow, wait a minute. Now all of a sudden the pieces started to fall into place. But as soon as I learned that and realized that, wait a minute, then I knew. I was like, oh, okay. I knew right then my mission either had to be A, to write a really good book, or B, just to keep some of the details to myself and find a way to bring this stuff back, because there was nothing wrong with it. So, well, at least I knew that the greatest brands of absinthe in history, the ones that were immortalized in, the
literature,
artistic and poetry, exactly. Yeah. So I knew that there was nothing wrong with those.
Right.
So basically, I knew that I had to find a way to get this to reproduce this stuff, and that's why I incorporated the company in 2000. Although I wouldn't actually release anything under the Jade name until 2004.
Right.
But
it just takes so long.
It took me that long. It took me trips to France and because absinthe was illegal in my own country. Not that I could really do what I wanted to do in my own country.
Right.
But for me, I struck gold in 2003 when I met the owner of a distillery that basically was in unmolested since the 1880s with all the original equipment. the distillery that distilled absinthe before the ban, and who was willing to just give me the reins. You know, it was like Captain Nemo in search of the Nautilus, and he found it.
Yeah, well, they don't want to be a man ignited by passion. You do not want to stand in their way. You know?
Well, I appreciate that attitude. On the other hand, here in France, and in a time when it wasn't even really clear that absinthe, not everyone believed that absinthe had inadvertently been legalized with the formation of the European Union,
right,
which superseded all the old laws.
That's amazing.
Well, but that didn't entirely go unnoticed, because unbeknownst to a lot of people is I became, in 2007, shortly after we got the ban lifted here in the United States, which is of course a whole subject in itself, but I became the last producer in France to be charged and fined under the original absinthe ban of 1915.
No kidding.
Yes.
Is it a lofty fine?
You have no idea how draconian the penalties are. They wanted to. I was threatened with jail.
Really?
Yes.
That big of a deal.
The reason why is because in 1988, when the EU passed all its food and beverage laws, someone in the Ministry of Health in France realized that this would re-legalize absinthe, and they quietly passed a decree that said, if an absinthe-like spirit contains enough Grand Absinthe, enough fennel, and enough hyssop, which is basic,
just the grassy root.
Yeah. Then it would, if it contains enough of these three, then it would legally be declared an absinthe, and all the penalties from the original ban would magically reappear.
That is rubbish.
I was the only producer found to be in violation.
Did they even research anybody else doing it?
Yes.
Oh, they did? Okay.
I was the only distiller in France whose products were found to be in violation. So you can deduce from that what you like.
Right.
But because of that, 15,000 liters of aging distillate were seized. I still have the customs tags as a cruel souvenir of that experience.
Yeah.
Cost me thousands of euros in fines.
God.
And we just wanted the dust to settle as quickly as we could, and it did. And then after that, we put a legal team together and went to the Ministry of Health and said, please show us the scientific basis, the justification for this law.
Yeah.
And of course, I've researched it, and there is none.
No, of course. Well, that's...
And they couldn't do it.
Always the case, right. Yeah.
Right, so they couldn't do it, and they said, well, we can't find it, so this decree has to be stricken. And we're like, thank you.
Finally.
So they did that, and that swept aside the last vestiges of the absinthe ban in France. Wow. I didn't get my money back.
Well, of course not.
I did get my distillates back.
They might have given you a handshake and said, well, sorry, we're going to take the money still.
Well, but you see, the attitude in France was, well, here, we'll just circumvent these, we'll with the other distillers is, well, we'll just not break the rules.
Yeah.
And with me, it's like, no, damn the torpedoes, full steam ahead.
That's right.
Of course, I paid the price, but I've got good street cred in France among distillers, of course, because they're like, how is it that an American, would come and
it's always an
change?
American, isn't it?
Well, but the thing is, but remember, I was like the, captain of the Titanic steering right into this iceberg.
That's
I didn't
right.
even know it was there.
Yeah.
So inadvertently, I became that person. But the thing is, it's just to get this done and to pave the way for the renaissance of the category that is absinthe, and which was a hugely important spirit back in the day, not just in France, but
globally. Yeah,
it was an object of global commerce.
It was a muse.
That's it. And to pave the way for absinthe's renaissance was a very trying task that required years of persistence.
So back to that question then. Does it make it feel all worth it now that it has been embraced, that people are using it creatively in the ways that absinthe was intended to be used back in the 19th century?
And that's our mission.
Yeah.
And in fact, when we were trying to convince it, the U.S. had the last standing ban on absinthe, effective ban. And that was the TTB's argument, was, we just don't want this to be brought in. We've seen the debacle that happened in Europe, with all this fake, flavored vodka from the Czech Republic that had green dye that was promising hallucinations and all this. The TTB had seen that. They didn't want that to happen here. Neither did we.
Right.
And really, the argument was, they needed to get to know us and realize that, hey, we wanted to see absinthe returned to its original place of respectability.
Right. Quality.
Equality.
Yeah.
That's right. They didn't want the debacle that happened in Europe to happen here. We didn't want it either. And that was our mission. So the thing is, we've achieved our mission. And that, as you just said, absinthe has returned to a place of respectability in the world of classic cocktails, which is a global phenomenon.
Absolutely.
Which is great. It's great for the industry. It's great for consumers. It's opened doors for producers of quality products.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's been a great thing for it. But so I feel satisfied in that we've achieved our mission. Now, I tell people my life is still, it's 85% education and about 15% distillation. So, you know, really, and the reason why, once again, I'm here in Austin, Texas today, is in the name of education.
Yeah. So
it's a never-ending project. It's like gardening. You just keep tending to it, but you never really get to a finish line. And
it recharges us. You know, I do find that when you get to be in front of an audience that's very inquisitive, very intelligent, that helps you keep going, refills your sails, so to speak.
You know, people, that audience often say, you know, they ask me, you studied absinthe for 20-something years now.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, don't you feel like you've exhausted the subject? And I tell them, you know, the beauty of this, aside from the fact that, I mean, this isn't just liquor. I mean, this is economics, politics, art, you know, science, good and bad.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's just so much wrapped up in the story of it that I never really reach the bottom of the rabbit hole. I mean, there's still questions that I can't honestly answer. I can only speculate. You know, that's the beauty of it. And I never intended for this spirit to hijack my entire professional career.
It just happens, though, doesn't it?
It did. And it was weird. I was kind of like, you know, I was an outlier. I was sort of the right person in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And just being a native of New Orleans and having seen that word, you know, the old absinthe house and things like that. And it was really kind of a perfect storm of events that put me in a position to do this.
Right. So then, because I love how serendipitous things happen, and then we all of a sudden are on this completely different path. But from my understanding, you grew up in New Orleans, and what kinds of things? Because it's interesting because scientists often are very, very cold and calculated, but you've got this charisma. You have this ability to light up a room. So you have both the social elements and the kind of the mathematical elements that a scientist does. So as a kid, question being, what kinds of things were you getting into? Were you playing music? Were you drawing?
I was getting into lots of mischief.
Yeah.
Yeah. I grew up basically all along I-10.
Okay, yeah.
Lafayette, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, you know, the whole thing.
Sure.
Yeah, but, you know, one thing about me is I have an analytical mind, but I also have a creative mind.
Yeah.
And satisfying that, you know, creative thirst has always been interesting. And yes, since you mentioned, I did play in bands back in New Orleans. That was an alter ego.
Was it a persona, a Bowie-esque persona?
That was a very different persona, and no one in my professional world, you know, I kept those worlds firmly divided.
Yeah, right.
Which I like. I like compartmentalizing these things.
Sure.
And so I could be these different people. But, yeah, so...
What'd you play, by the way? I'm just curious.
Actually, I played I played lead guitar, I played bass. I did vocals, you know, I was...
if you could assign a genre, what genre might you assign it?
Oh, I tell you, for me, I mean, the things that I really enjoyed the most were 60s Britpop.
Speak my language. Zombies?
The Zombies,
amazing,
the Kinks, the Who, the Yardbirds, you know, all that stuff. Did all those things. Had the original equipment.
Did you really?
I would restore, not only that, I gained another side project, a profitable hobby, whereby I would get amps sent to me air freight from England, amps that were found in the cellars of homes, and I would restore them. So not only did we play 60s Britpop, but we had the original equipment, all the guitar, the instruments, the amplifiers, everything, old tube amps, all maintained and restored by me.
It's amazing.
So yeah, so I got into that thing, and then there's still some articles out there in the web that I, you know, posted back in like the 90s on authenticating like reissue amplifiers,
boxes and mad amps and orange.
I still own them.
Oh man, no kidding.
I still own them. So I had some equipment. One of the things about me is I sort of had my own experience with the Great Flood of Hurricane Katrina. 7 feet of water in a house in New Orleans, which is why I no longer live in New Orleans.
You're in Alabama now, is that right?
I'm in Birmingham.
Oh,
Yeah.
Birmingham.
I'm about 700 feet above sea level now in the southern tip.
By
of the
design, I'm
Appalachians.
sure.
Yeah. But Birmingham is a vibrant place, and it's definitely moving in the right direction. I like it a lot. But yes, so while I was back there, I had all these 60s era original guitars and amplifiers, and I maintained all this equipment. I would restore them for other people around the country. Wow. And yeah,
were you like the guy? Like touring bands would come in and you would repair their stuff. They would contact you.
Oh, they would marvel at our back line.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, people like, is that a? Yeah, that's a 1958 Gretsch Duojet.
Oh my gosh!
Yes, that is a 1966 Epiphone Casino. Yes, that is a 1963
the
Gretsch
Lennon
Casino.
That's
that's
crazy.
So we had all this stuff. People were like, how did you nail Keith Richards' opening riff and I can't get no satisfaction? I'm like, well, because I'm using the same Maestro FZ1A fuzz tone with carbon batteries.
Yeah.
I mean,
oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah, I know, it's nuts.
Did you want it? So all right, we're in Austin, so you can throw a dart and you're going to hit a fucking musician. That's just how it goes.
Yeah.
Did that become something where you're like, actually, I'd really like to be on the road. I'd rather be a touring musician than going to school and doing science.
Well, it's the thing is back, and I had this struggle back in the 80s where I had to make a decision. I came to a fork in the road, and that was either I was going to finish college, okay, or I was going to play guitar.
Yeah.
And I realized that, honestly, I couldn't do both.
Wow.
No, because if I'm going to do something, I've got to do it 110%.
Right.
So
didn't want it to be divided.
That's right. But no, I had to take care of business, and I had to finish. I had to get that degree. I had to get, I had to have a real profession.
Was there pressure from your folks to do that, or was that more for you because you seem inherently ambitious?
Well, that was more about me.
Yeah.
And I knew that I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up,
sure.
But I knew that I was really good in applied sciences, and that I had to get some credentials. I had to do something. I had to put something together like that.
Right.
And so so I did that. And it took me through 4 universities, and I even started a PhD that I couldn't continue because of Katrina. But
was it the one at Tulane?
That was at Tulane.
And then some Harvard studies too. It looks
like.
Yeah.
I started at Harvard and actually attended Harvard while I was still in high school.
No kidding.
Yeah, and then LSU, University of Louisiana Lafayette, and then eventually made my way to Tulane.
And there's a common thread through these degree programs, and that is ultimately chemistry and plants, right?
Yeah, environmental chemistry and environmental microbiology and chemistry, were my specialties.
Yeah.
And I literally traveled the world and basically, finding ways to solve environmental problems, organic contaminants, degrading them using bacteria, which is quite interesting. And
can you
fun.
give me? So let's take a place perhaps like India, which has infrastructurally a lot of challenges. When you talk about those health problems or those puzzles that you're trying to solve, what might be a way to articulate that to me? What might be something you try to solve or help in a community with?
Oh, I'll give you a good example. Yeah. You've got some place that's being redeveloped, and it's got an old gas station on a corner that had some underground storage tanks that leaked gasoline for years.
Shit, okay.
So how can you, without digging up the whole place, which is impractical, how can you solve the problem?
Wow.
So right. So it's real challenging 3-dimensional kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And and I was good at it, and I developed algorithms to do this.
Yeah.
And it was generated some good karma that way, I think.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Putting it back in there. Yeah.
Yeah. At least I felt like I was doing something productive, and I was if I may say so, I was pretty competent at it.
Yeah.
And all that absinthe sort of became the study of absinthe became like a side project.
Sure.
Like a research hobby.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you, in terms of just drinking in general, right, or alcohol, which to me is one of the direct conduits to a culture globally, right?
Sure.
Go to cognac,
sure.
Go to Calvados, whatever. So you're traveling a bit. Did you see any kind of passion for spirits just in general as you were kind of in these other cultures?
Well, for me, that started back in my university days. I did some bartending.
Oh, did you really? Okay.
Yeah, and one of the things that I looked at different spirits, but from a chemistry standpoint.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what makes this, whiskey better than this one?
Right.
What's the difference between cognac VS versus VSOP? What's going, why?
You're digging into the details.
I did.
Yeah.
So, the thing is, I sort of had a bit of that in my background, but absinthe, I'd never heard of that.
Yeah.
What was that stuff? I mean, I'd even heard of Baijiu, but I never heard of absinthe.
Really?
Yeah.
You're ahead of the curve on that one. Now it's all flipped.
Yeah, someone brought me a bottle of Baijiu from China back in those days. So if someone, I wanted to get someone out of the bar, I just offered them a free shot of Baijiu. And
notes of horse pee and mushrooms.
That generally work. And the irony is I really like Baijiu now. I find it fantastic. It's like sauce with alcohol.
That's right. That's a great point. Yeah,
it really is. Like stir fry sauce
unctuous,
with alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. Lots of umami. But, so, for me, I was, and really, it happened back when I was working in a lab, and I had seen the old absinthe house, and like many people had seen it, never put much thought into what absinthe meant, what that was, and then I got this alternative books catalog in the mail.
Alternative books catalog.
Yeah, this is
that
back
can mean a lot of things
before Amazon. Yeah, because Amazon's all started selling, but before Amazon, it was alternative books. I mean, with all sorts of things like. Phenylethylamines I've known and loved by Shulgin, which was a classic. How to grow like your own psilocybe mushrooms.
Okay, see, all right, there we go. I get this.
Yeah, and one of them was a book called Absinthe: History in a Bottle by Barnaby Conrad, Chronicle Books, San Francisco, 1988, which is still perhaps, if there's one book about absinthe that a person would buy, and that would be the one. It's amazing how good of a book that was, considering all the rubbish.
Yeah.
That was around, how good of a book that was published in 1988. And I read that book. I got a copy of that book, read it like 3 times inside of a week, and I even wrote him a letter. Not everyone had an email address back
That's
then.
right, yeah. Where was he from? New York?
No, he's San Francisco.
Oh, right.
And I wrote him a letter. I said, hey, love the book, great job, incredible amount of research went into it, but I have a few questions.
Yeah.
Like, what about this, and he wrote back and said, basically everything I know is in the book. I don't know. I was like, okay, wow. And I just couldn't find any good information. And then
you were dissatisfied with the answers.
I was completely. I couldn't believe that something. Well, if it was so popular, and if it was harmful, then why did so many people drink? I mean, what was the deal? What was the hook? What was the catch?
Yeah.
And I wanted to know, but there was none around. Nobody knew there was no good information on what was in it or exactly how it was made. I mean, there were only hints. And the thing is, and when I really got hooked is when I walked past a place on Charter Street, a French culinary antique shop, still there today, Lucullus Antiques, and I saw a couple of antique absinthe glasses and spoons in the window.
Oh, nice. The slotted spoons?
I went back the next day. I was walking with a date, saw that. I was like, that's it. I'm coming to this place at lunch tomorrow, and I'm getting it. I bought those, and I was completely hooked. And I had the antique glasses and spoons, had everything except the liquid, and I needed that.
I don't throw this word around too often, but rebel, right? Seems like you're on the verge of punk rock with the bands that you like, and this thing's emerging from the Who, if you take it, and then Manchester blows up in this big scene, Buzzcocks and stuff. Are you that kind of person that's not going to be standardized, is not going to live within the boundaries? You want to keep pushing until you get somewhere else. Does that make sense?
Well, I guess if I become fascinated with something, and I'm a scientist, I want answers.
That's right. Yeah.
And
but the creative mind is what helps you get them in a way.
That's right. That's it. The creativity is needed to obtain those answers.
That's right. Yeah.
And basically, I can be a very determined person, especially when I think that what the obstacle that's keeping me from achieving my goal is something ridiculous.
I love it, man, because it's like a bulldog, but articulately bulldogging your way to the truth.
Right, bulldog.
I need to know. Yeah, right.
That's a good term. I have to remember that. Yeah, but that's exactly what it was. I was very, very determined.
Yeah.
And for me, I realized that then the only way I was going to get absinthe was I had to distill my own.
Right.
Which was some success, some failure. But the Rosetta Stone was in 1996. I came across not one but 2 full bottles of vintage absinthe from two very different directions within 30 days of each other. It was nuts. It was like lightning striking somewhere in the middle of the Sahara Desert,
Right.
twice. And it was, and the thing is, so when I was able to draw samples through those sealed bottles and taste them, and then I became I became a member of a very lonely club of people who knew firsthand what vintage absinthe tasted like.
Oh,
who were alive to talk about it.
Oh my gosh.
So that, and that really, by this time I'm totally hooked and I'm determined. But this time I'm determined. I want to know what's in it.
Right. Did you feel any obligation to be the conduit from the past to the present? In a way, you're like kind of reaching beyond the grave, in a sense,
Yeah. For me, it was like, how can there not be credible answers to these questions, which are so obvious?
Yeah.
And the answer, the reason why was simple. And that is because no one really had vintage absinthe and modern science, scientific equipment in the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how many people do you know come across bottles of, antique absinthe?
Yeah, I've never.
Nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody.
You might have grabbed the last few in the whole country, really.
Well, in the country, possibly. It was next to nothing, obviously. But, it's like, it was crazy. But, the thing is, at this point, I wanted to know what was wrong with it.
Right.
I mean, here's my profession is, part of my profession is I analyze soil and water samples.
Yeah.
Looking for trace, amounts of, dangerous contaminants, dangerous pesticides, things like that. I want to know what's in this stuff.
Right.
What made it bad? And so back in, like I say, in the beginning of the conversation, back in 2000, I had the opportunity to do it. And I found nothing.
So it started to make sense that it didn't make sense.
Well, and then it's like, sometimes Occam's razor holds true.
Yeah.
Well, not more than sometimes, most of the time.
Sure.
And basically, then I realized this is just the gin craze all over again in a different place with a different spirit 150 years later.
Wow.
And that's what it was. And the thing is, people ask me, where in the world does one come across a full bottle of antique absinthe?
But that's what was meant to happen for you.
That's
know what I
the
mean?
strange thing. It's
Yeah.
like when people say, how did you find those? Like, I didn't. It's like they found me.
That's right. The sword and the stone. You're the only one that literally could pull it out of the bottle.
And so I was just somehow became that individual. But, and then, I mean, every once in a while, there's some old estate, some big chateau in France or Italy or Spain that's been in a same family for generations.
Right.
And all these places have their own wine caves, their own wine cellars below the house. And basically, there's oftentimes just loaded with piles of dusty bottles, and no one who's alive really knows what the hell's down there.
Yeah.
And so you got to have someone that can go down there and identify these things, determine what can be sold, what should go to auction.
Of
what's
course,
not,
someone's got to come in.
Someone's got to do it. And the fortunate thing is, I know people that do this. And every once in a while, because when people caught wind back then that absinthe was going to be banned,
Right.
what they do? They stocked it.
Yeah.
That's it. They squirreled it away. The thing is, unfortunately, particularly in France, a lot of people died in the First World War. A lot of young men who would have inherited this. So it was like a whole generation skip,
Right.
if you will. And some of these bottles of absinthe just never got imbibed and got forgotten about.
Wow.
And the thing is, people that had wine cellars had money. So they never bought cheap stuff.
That's right. Yeah.
So whenever it's like, it's like going and finding champagne. Oh, another bottle of, Salon 28. I mean, the thing is, all the absinthe that we find is all almost invariably really good top brands. That's what people who had money bought.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the one thing we can't study is the equivalent of a, cheap wine, a really cheap absinthe that was marketed toward poor alcoholics that would have had the indulgence that caused the problems that the French talked about.
There's notoriously,
That's right. But, the thing is, in Anglo-American culture, we never experienced those problems, especially here in the States. We never experienced problems of people drinking absinthe and going to sanitariums. Why? Because the cheap stuff didn't get exported here.
I see.
We had all the top brands, even going way back. I mean, in New Orleans, we find absinthe being imported there. We find it in the stock list and advertisements in newspapers as far back as the 1830s.
No kidding.
Yeah, which is really crazy because, that's before absinthe was even popular. And that was only when it was becoming sort of popular in France. And Anglo-American culture by 1900 was all about fancy cocktails. And that's the way absinthe was. We used it for the most part.
So when you think of absinthe as a genre in itself, because it's something so unique about it, and first, I'm just curious for me, when you stumble across one of these ancient, dusty bottles of absinthe and you do crack it open, what is the difference? Is there a different experience that you get just by tasting something that's that old and has had so much time to kind of mature in the bottle?
Well, that's actually interesting that you mentioned that, because anyone who's interested in spirits who's listening to this will know that basically whiskey, cognac, they don't age in a bottle.
That's right. Because there's not.
Right, they don't age in a bottle. But absinthe does. Chartreuse does as well. And similar products, they will age in the bottle. And it's always a, when you taste 100-year-old absinthe, which is great, by the way. Of course. It tastes great.
It's got to.
But it doesn't taste exactly like what it did 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. And 100 years ago, people weren't drinking 100-year-old absinthe. So therein lies another
challenge for you to. Right.
Exactly. Another piece of the puzzle. And I had this conversation just recently in London with this distributor has an amazing vintage spirits collection, and I was talking about this. So he said, "Well, let's pop open a 100-year-old bottle of Chartreuse and let's explore it."
Of course, yeah, might as well.
Oh gosh, it really hurts my ears actually to hear that cork come out of the bottle. But it's like, okay, it's open now. May as well.
At least you're in the room for it.
May as well indulge. Yeah. That's there is no better way to go through to learn about historical spirits than to drink them.
That's right.
It's to be in a position to be able to do that.
How do you feel about that? That you're like a world renowned.
Honestly, I'm such a purist. I have never opened a bottle of vintage absinthe. Actually, no, I take that back. I did, but only to cap it with nitrogen and then reseal it for someone.
What are you waiting for?
I know. Well, the fortunately for me is I know people who do open those bottles.
Yeah.
And they're actually quite sensible, because when someone opens a bottle of vintage absinthe, they'll often decant a large portion of it into like 50 mil, bottles, like mini liquor bottles, and we'll sell those, which is great, because then it gives people who don't have, several thousand to spend on a bottle of vintage absinthe. You can spend, $100 or so or whatever, and
still get the
experience.
Taste it.
Yeah, why not? I mean, tasting history, you can't replace that.
Yeah.
So, it's I'm thankful that I know people who are willing to open bottles of, or demijohns of 200-year-old demijohns of Rhum Agricole, or pre-Phyllox for a cognac, and But the beauty is, history doesn't. What's in the bottles, it doesn't lie.
So the bottle. Are you a man that's of the moment? Do you experience these things and think about it as like, this right now is as good as it can be until the next present moment? Does that make sense? Some people are too obsessed with the future, and put it that way.
Well, I can obsess. I do think ahead, and I do obsess about the future a bit. I am sort of. I tend to be nostalgic and sentimental.
Yeah.
And to me, it's hard to open a 100-year-old bottle of anything. And when someone says, and contrast that with someone I know who says, "Hey, let's drink some wine," sure, and pops open thinks nothing of open a bottle of 1900 Tokai Essentia.
Yeah.
Which I couldn't do, but I'm glad there's someone that can, because that's the only way that I'll get to try it.
Is there a moment that would be monumental enough for you to open one of those bottles up?
Oh yeah, I mean, I have my Armageddon Day stash.
How about a positive moment, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly tasted some things. I mean, and thanks to the wonder of epidural needles, epidural syringes, one can draw samples from bottles and taste them without actually opening the bottle.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
That's right.
Which is how you were managed to reverse engineering the older bottles, right?
Well, yeah, pretty much in some cases, yes. And also how I managed to co-author a couple of published scientific studies in peer-reviewed journals on the composition of vintage absinthe.
Amazing.
Which wouldn't be possible without bottles that were in good condition, that were sealed.
Yeah.
Where we have, witnesses present, chains of custody to draw samples.
That's amazing.
Guarantee that, the integrity of the study is intact. But for me, it's good that medical devices can be repurposed.
See, it's using your acumen in science to be able to, to pull it in.
How can I push a needle through a cork without stopping the needle with cork? Oh, the epidural syringe.
See, I mean,
Yeah.
man, I'll tell you, that's how new genres are born, whether it's music, whether it's film. It's this intersection of talents and interests that allow people to do these new things. And oddly enough, or ironically enough, absinthe is not new, but bringing the original essence of it to the present, that's new. Does that make sense? Like reinventing the past?
Well, that's it. And the thing is, in the case of absinthe, unlike whiskey and gin, absinthe had been absent from the market. I mean, virtually extinguished from the world market.
Yeah.
For the better part of a century. So, with the whole classic cocktail phenomenon, I tell people that if I had to be marooned on a desert island with one cocktail book, it would probably be the Savoy Cocktail Book,
Sure.
1930.
Oh yeah.
Published by an American, Harry Craddock, that went to London during Prohibition so he could continue to bartend.
Mm-hmm.
That book contains over 100 cocktails that call for absinthe in some way, shape, or form.
Wow.
And the thing is, in part of, sometimes in bar training, what I'll do is I'll make a cocktail that contains, ingredients like grenadine or lemon juice, whatever. And I'll do one with completely industrialized modern ingredients and then one with the original natural, the way that it was done. And of course, there's, only one of these cocktails you taste and it makes sense.
Yeah.
And, so the thing is, if you want to have, want to be able to recreate classic cocktails, you need spirits that taste like classic spirits.
Vintage amps, man.
Yeah, that's it. It's all vintage amps. It got to sound like it. Got to have tubes. It has to sound like
That's
vintage.
right.
It has to have the right composition capacitors and resistors, the right value electrolytic filter capacitors. all this stuff. It's the same thing with spirits.
It is.
The devil's in the details, and there are a lot of them.
Yeah.
And basically, marketing's cheap, but hey, the liquid doesn't lie.
That's right.
And one of the beauty about being able to taste Old Tom Gin from the 1880s is what it tastes like.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when you have something that doesn't have a legal definition to protect its integrity.
Right.
I mean, for example, we take some alcohol and add some caramel coloring and some artificial flavoring, and we call it bourbon whiskey. We're going to run into trouble quickly.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We'll never even get it to market.
Right.
Because bourbon whiskey is protected. Absinthe isn't and never has been. And that's always been a problem, and we're trying to rectify that problem right now. There's only one country actually that has a legal definition of absinthe, and that's Switzerland.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Well, they have their own clear version, right? The Blanche or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that is something that needs to be changed, and that's always been an issue. When you taste bourbon whiskey from the past as compared to today, it generally tastes very much the same, with exception of the fact that they didn't chill filter in those days, and that does make a difference.
Much more oiliness and richness. Yeah,
that's it. I've had the privilege of tasting some pre-prohibition bourbon on more than one occasion, and I marvel at the oiliness that makes it. That's all filtered out. So the contents today can be crystal clear and look pretty in the bottle.
It's auto-tuned, Ted. It's auto-tuned.
That's
bourbon.
right.
Yeah.
And that isn't written in a legal definition.
Yeah.
But the thing is, aside from that, it's not too far off. With absinthe, there was nothing. So you could put anything in a bottle and call it absinthe. And that was part of the wave of misinformation that I swam against.
So it seems like, we're at a point in you're at a point in your career where you've traveled the world. You've been an amazing spokesman of the past while also helping people, empowering them to do things with absinthe for the future. Where do you retreat to now? So when you're not on the road, when you're not judging competitions or having classes, what kinds of things are you doing back in Birmingham?
Well, back home in Birmingham, once again, I have a different persona.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are cocktail bars and
sure.
and restaurants with good cocktail programs, and obviously they know who I am, and I know some of these people, but for the most part, I am reclusive. I grow. I'm sort of a horticulturist.
Yeah, I've noticed the pictures are very beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sort of like an Indiana Jones of rare native medicinal plants that are endangered, which I attempt to procure for the botanical gardens, for the ethnobotanical collection. Basically, anything I grow is either edible or medicinal.
Wow.
Including the plants that are used to produce absinthe and many others that were well known a century ago. A lot of them in botanical medicine, and today are virtually, some of them are almost impossible to find. So that's been an interesting challenge, and it's basically gave me a good excuse to learn the practice of 19th century pharmacognosy, which is the preparation of botanical medicines.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Which has been of great benefit to me in the commercial world. For example, Dale DeGroff's Pimento Aromatic Bitters, which I co-created with Dale and produce. Things like that. You may also know that I produce Jade Perique tobacco liqueur.
Yeah.
Not yet legal in the United States.
Yeah.
We're working with the FDA to see if we can't change that.
The grass, man. That list, the grass list is such a pain.
Yeah, exactly. But they gave me some hoops of fire to jump through, and I've jumped them. So now it's their turn. And
do you find it hard to create that separate life where you're out of the media limelight, that you're just a guy out there in nature doing his thing?
Well, I think maybe in Manhattan, I wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of places I wouldn't be able to do it. But where I am, and just the fact that I can get away in 40 miles and hike through a very hilly 159,000 acre national forest.
Yeah.
I kind of like that. Or I can just day trip and I can get up to the Smokies or down at the beach if I want. So these kind of things allow me to disconnect. But, it's when I can disconnect. I'm just the type of person that I recharge my mental batteries when I don't have a lot of people around. And then I can get to my own world in my own thoughts. And that's when I can think about things and ponder them and be creative.
Yeah.
So that fuels my professional life.
Are you still playing guitar every now and again?
The thing about that is that tends to be an obsessive sort of thing.
What do you mean?
Yeah. For example, I picked up a guitar and started playing not long ago. And then watch this video from 1981. I think it's called. It was by Rush. It was their whole moving pictures tours. Stage Left.
Yes.
I was like, God, man, these guys were really good.
Yep.
So then it was like I got the idea in my head that I wanted to play that whole video. I mean, everything all the way through. So naturally, I got the same amplifier setup that he had, the same guitars, the same effect. It's like, why am I doing this?
That's a great question.
Yeah, it's like I really need this. Like I need a hole in my head.
Yeah.
And I guess some people play video games.
That's right.
Well, this was my video game.
A little more productive, I think, in your case, but
I think a little more musical maybe.
Sure.
It didn't require a high-speed processor and a 60 Mbps connection.
Right.
But the thing is, it does take time, and time is the most precious resource that I have. And ultimately, it's the same for all of us.
Yeah.
You'll always make another dollar. You'll never get another day back.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So that has, as I have, time has worn on. I've come to realize that.
It's an interesting place to arrive at, to have success globally, and then saying, well, actually, this is great, but I need to tune it out. And I need to get back connected with nature. Well,
I think that we all know the term burnout.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think that the reason why it's unfortunate, whenever we get burned out on something that we enjoy doing, or even a profession. But the thing is, for people like me, and I think there are a lot of us, we have to, whether we realize it or not, we have to completely disconnect ourselves and find something else. Everybody needs a hobby.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Everybody needs something. Some people play Sudoku. Okay, I do other things. I grow plants. That's an endless rabbit hole of...
There is no end. Yeah, there's no finish line.
No, there is no finish line. And there's lots of, and if I get some sort of rare, ultra rare plant from the Galapagos Island and I'm growing it and there's no information on how to cultivate it, see, then it's all uncharted territory. But I mean, that's
Indiana Jones.
I need my mind never stops from the moment I wake up until the moment I go to sleep. Fortunately, I can turn it off to sleep. But the thing is, it never stops. The voice in my head is always going.
Yeah.
And I need something to chew on. Like a dog needs a bone.
Right.
I need to give my brain something to chew on, even when I'm not really doing anything that's productive professionally.
Yeah.
So I just find that's how, I've learned myself. I know what I need to disconnect and unplug. And I think part of our downfall as a society is especially with the advent of the information age, and digital media, I mean, Facebook, everything is just, there's so much information and it comes so quickly.
Yeah.
and we're overloaded with it.
Is that good for you? Because it seems like someone who constantly feeds on learning and feeds on knowledge, and that's debatable whether stuff online is knowledge or not, but at least it's fodder for you to think and keep creating. Is that a good or bad thing for you?
It's a double-edged sword. I mean, it's just as much of a curse in some ways as it is a blessing.
Yeah.
You know, while it is a conduit, a vehicle that provides us with the ability to accumulate information at a much faster rate than anyone could 25 years ago.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it's also it's a potential source of stress.
That's right.
And you know, I think that I know what works for me and what helps me keep my sanity. And the thing is, I really like the world of spirits and be able to create spirits, and not just spirits that really, in my opinion, are important, or aspects of them that are important, and explore those. But if I get burned out, well, then what does that serve?
Yeah.
It doesn't serve me or anyone else, really.
You can't help anymore.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful that the information age has allowed other people to appreciate the things that I do, which I think in a way has reshaped the whole category. I mean, you know, think about even just craft beers, you know, and how that's the whole craft beer, you know, explosion, how that's happened. And, you know, where would that be without the internet?
The ability to socialize it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
To a larger audience.
Exactly. It wouldn't be practical. Point. I mean, you'd have, I mean, so many of these, you know, craft breweries wouldn't have opened.
Yeah. Well, it's a way to actually build a brand now. It's a vehicle, a channel that was not there before, a digital channel.
That's right. And, but on the other hand, it's a source of stress because now how much of our day is consumed by the digital world? That's
a great point.
So the thing is, once again, you know, it's everything in moderation, including the digital age.
Yeah.
Pick and choose your battles.
Tune out.
You know, I can find myself, I can waste half a day sitting just even looking through news articles of things that don't even have any bearing on me in any way, shape, or form.
I know. We're all kind of complicit in that, you know, and we encourage each other. So, but yeah. So, I mean, I feel like you struck a pretty decent balance, though. Being so connected to nature, that does just by design take you out of technology, getting your hands dirty, getting your mind just filled with these details about nature, the smells, things that technology can never really replicate.
Well, balance is the key, in my opinion, to a healthy mind and overall to success and gratification in life.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I feel like I'm the guy in a unicorn with a big stack of plates in each hand. I mean, on a unicycle, rather. Unicorn.
Either way, I like both images. I think
yeah. Unicorn. Yeah. Okay. No. All right. That's interesting too.
Because if you're, I mean, the luck and the serendipity, it's much like a unicorn-esque kind of presence if you think about it.
Well, for me, the hard work and the whole realm of absinthe, most of the hard work is done.
Yeah.
We've stemmed the tide of misinformation. Thanks in part to the digital age. Thanks also in part to the craft cocktail revolution, which happened simultaneously, which couldn't have been better timing.
Yeah.
Because that was the wave that carried, you know, the whole category of absinthe on a surfboard.
Absolutely.
You know. So
great timing on all of these things.
Yeah, that's all been serendipitous.
Yeah.
For the most part, and for me, it's opened up some avenues to do some other things. But once again, it would be very easy for me to jump into a situation where I make myself much busier than I need to be.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's maintaining balance.
So I've got one last question for you, because I love that you're deeply rooted in music and that you think about those details, that you've had your hands on amps that I've probably drooled about over the years as a kid, you know. And for me, I'm really curious how you answer this. So let's say you're sipping absinthe anywhere in the world, your favorite bar, someone's chateau, wherever, and you could have a conversation and share that drink with anybody living or deceased.
Oh, wow.
Who might you like to share that absinthe with?
Wow. You know, that's not the first time I've been asked this question, and it's really difficult for me to come up with a straight answer in the same way that's difficult for me to come up with a singular answer when someone asks me what my favorite film is.
Oh, that's tough. Yeah.
No, this is tough for me the same way because there's so many different people.
How about, let's make it someone French. Okay, is that fair? Someone that may have actually been part of that absinthe culture as it started to come up.
Oh, I tell you what, I would, if that's the case, I mean, and specifically relevant to what I do, I would definitely like to go back to the 19th century and I would very much like to speak to. I would very much like to speak to one of maybe 3 or 4 distillers back in the day.
Interesting.
Just to ask them a few questions that only a distiller would know, that wouldn't necessarily end up in would be a mindless detail to the public that wouldn't.
But the
end
things
up in
maybe you've been striving for years, right?
Yeah, just a couple of I would just like to share ideas.
Yeah.
I would really like to sort of pick their brain and see how accurate I was about certain things that I've surmised had to be the case.
Yeah. That's an amazing way to look at it.
Yeah, why not? Just verification, but I think it would be fascinating just from a cultural standpoint to go back and do it.
Well, I want to talk about one movie then real quick just because it's fresh on my mind. Did you ever see Midnight in Paris? It's a Woody Allen movie. Owen Wilson.
I've seen some. Yeah, I and the funny thing is I do find Woody Allen comedy amusing.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think I've seen that one. Is who's in that one?
It's Owen Wilson, Rachel McAdams.
Oh, that's right.
With Hemingway, Picasso.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. That's probably one. That's one that I overlooked and just kind of vanished from my mind. No, not seen it.
Because it's got the Belle Epoque in there, and there's a scene where there's all the art at Gauguin is meeting, and it's just it made me think about absinthe as a thread of the culture and the social nightlife. And I don't know, just thought about you, though. You might like that.
Well, in the days before Facebook, when being social meant that you actually had to go to a place and meet up with your friends, around when you knocked off of work for your daily medicine like everybody else did. That was definitely a bars in general today are cultural, social centers. Like you say, it's more than just like alcohol. Alcohol is the lubricant.
That's right.
But the thing is, in those days when I explained to people, just imagine, that you went to the cafe every day. There was no television. There was no internet. People now have, so many people now that you see in bars have never known they weren't around a world where there was no internet.
Yeah.
So, that's getting that picture of the past is getting, as we move into the future, is getting more and more difficult to replicate in our own minds.
Yeah, I think we're striving for it more every day too. I think that's why I wanted to sit down and talk with you. Just talk,
Yeah.
Sometimes we lose that.
With each passing year, we're more and more plugged into the matrix.
True.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah, we are.
Well, it's been really a pleasure chatting, man. Privilege to thank you on what I'd consider short notice, taking some time out to sit and
it's
chat
my pleasure.
with me, man.
Good to be here.
Yeah.
Good to be
Austin's a great spot, and we're really glad to have you. So
yeah, let's keep it weird.
Yeah. Safe travels, mate. Thanks. Well, there we have it. Mr. Ted Breaux, the founder and president of Jade Liqueurs, bringing Lucid Absinthe, kind of this historical throwback to classic absinthes that Ted collected and extracted. A master scientist, an amplification guy. There's so many different pieces to Ted, and it seems like he's so intelligent that he's got these different chapters, these different silos to his life, and he keeps them all afloat. And it was great to have him in Austin judging the Lucid Absinthe cocktail competition. And I hope to talk to Ted soon and maybe even get a look at that classic amp collection he has there in Alabama. So thank you for listening to Show to V with Mike G. No matter how many episodes you are into Netflix new series Ozark and you're thinking Jason Bateman really rules as the protagonist here, or if you're thinking I could use a great glass of absinthe just about now, please keep dancing.